Tonight I have the great honor and privilege of introducing somebody I truly admire and respect. My wife Pam and I are also very proud to call John and Marga our great friends. Our speaker tonight has been the General Secretary of Rotary International and our Rotary Foundation since July 1 of 2011. John holds a law degree from Harvard University, a master's in modern history from Oxford University, where he studied as a Marshall Scholar, and a bachelor in government and Soviet studies from the Hamilton College in New York. Prior to joining Rotary, John was an international partner with the law firm of Baker & McKenzie, specializing in international corporate transaction in emerging markets. He also helped to establish the firm's Moscow office and was managing partner of its office in Ukraine and Prague. From 2004 to 2009, John was the vice president for the operations and compact development for the Millennium Challenge Corporation, a U.S. government agency in 2004 to deliver foreign assistance to the world's most poorest countries. During his tenure, he completed the negotiation of assistance agreements totaling $6.3 billion to 18 countries for infrastructure, agriculture, water, sanitation, health, and education projects. As General Secretary of Rotary, John leads a very diverse staff of over 800 at Rotary International World Headquarters in Evanston and 7 international offices around the world. He and his very special wife, Marga, are both Rotarians and Paul Harris Fellows. Will you please give a very warm Colorado welcome to the General Secretary of Rotary International and a great friend, Mr. John Hewko.
Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Greg, thank you. Thank you so much for that very warm and overly generous welcome. And thank you to you and Pam for inviting us to come to be with you this evening. I think this area, this district, is extremely fortunate to have had Greg as your director. He did an absolutely outstanding job as RI director and as vice president, and he continues to serve. And he continues to serve our organization with distinction on a number of committees, currently on the Operations Review Committee. So again, Greg, thank you not only for your friendship, but for all that you do for our great organization. Governor Kurt, thank you for having me here in your district, and I'm glad your year is going well. You've got all your club visits over with. We've got District Governor Chris and Dave from 5440 and 5470. Thank you both for joining us. We also have a number of governor-elects, PDGs, District Foundation Chair. Dan, great to have you with us this evening as well. Jim, congratulations on your Service Above Self Award. Outstanding achievement. Congratulations. And a special shout out to District Governor-elect Bob. Bob, thank you for, where's Bob? Bob, thank you for getting us here from the airport in one piece. I'm glad we missed the snowstorm that was here last night. And then, of course, Dave, thank you for that extraordinary and where's Dave? Extraordinary, inspiring story. Thank you for all that you do for all those children and people with polio. You give them life, you give them hope. So thank you for everything that you do. And on a slightly lighter note, you were commenting how frustrating it is to be a Broncos fan and be leading 20-0 at halftime and not winning. Well, I'm a Lions fan. We don't have that problem. So. And of course, Marga and I love coming to District 5450. In fact, I'd say you have, and I am not exaggerating here, I think you have one of the great districts in the Rotary world. You do great projects. You have a tremendous impact on not only the local community here in Colorado, but in communities throughout the world. In fact, as your General Secretary, this, I think, is the district, other than the district where Evanston is located and where I live, this is the district that I have most visited as your General Secretary over the last 9 years. So for me, coming back here is almost like coming back home. So thank you for having me so many times. Now, as Greg mentioned, I'm very fortunate and privileged to be in my ninth year as your General Secretary. But it was really only through an incredible act of serendipity that I'm actually here in this job. And I think for me personally, President-elect Holger's theme for next year, Rotary Opens Opportunities, is particularly appropriate. You know, in Rotary, I like to say there's 1 degree of separation in Rotary. And perhaps some of you have heard this story, but I am here in this job largely thanks to my father. He's a very avid Rotarian, and as Greg mentioned, I was in the Bush administration setting up a new foreign assistance agency called the Millennium Challenge Corporation. And in 2008, of course, President Obama won the election. And since I was a political appointee, I became, as our friends across the pond like to say, redundant. And so the question was, what do I do? And I didn't want to go back to corporate law, sort of push that envelope. And so I went to the Carnegie Endowment and spent a year and a half as a visiting scholar then, but was still sort of trying to figure out what to do. And then one day out of nowhere, I get a letter from my father. And as I mentioned, my father's been a Rotarian for 40-some years. He was a member of the Clarkston Rotary Club, which is north of Detroit. And he's also a very avid reader of the Rotarian magazine. And so I opened the envelope, and he had ripped out of the magazine, there had been an advertisement that Rotary was looking for a new general secretary. And so he rips it out, and he writes across the corner in sort of half English, half Ukrainian, "John, you may want to check this out. You seem to have the qualifications for the job." So I look at it, and I saw that Korn Ferry was the search firm that was conducting the search for Rotary, and we had used Korn Ferry to stand up the Millennium Challenge Corporation when I was in the government. So I called Charlie Ingersoll, who was the managing partner in the office. I said, "Charlie, I just got this thing from my dad. It talks about some Rotary opportunity. I really haven't thought about it. It's something I should be interested in." He says, "Yeah, you're right, John. I hadn't thought about you either. But now that I think about you, I think you'd be an ideal candidate. You should throw your hat in the ring." And I did. And as they say, the rest is history. Now, I never actually thought of Rotary as an opportunity, but it was really that serendipity, that 1 degree of separation that you have with Rotary. But there are 2 key lessons that I learned from that experience. And the first is that very, very good things happen when you read the Rotarian magazine. And the second is always listen to your father. And so as we look at the future of Rotary, the future of our great organization, you know, just as my future back in 2010 required me not only to listen to my father, but to step out of my comfort zone as a corporate lawyer, I think so too must we do the same as we look at Rotary's future. And of course, we don't need to listen to my father, but we do need to listen to what the marketplace is telling us and be willing to step out of our comfort zone, to think out of the box, to shake things up, and to do things differently. But before I expand on this idea and the future of Rotary, let me first start by saying that our organization is having an impact on the world as never before. So if someone were to ask the question, why Rotary matters in today's world, there is no clearer example or answer than the impact that our 36,000 clubs have on their local communities. In fact, the work of the clubs in this district is replicated 36,000 times around the world, year after year, decade after decade. Now, one of the goals I had when I took this job was to see if there was some way that we could quantify the worldwide value of everything we do. We know how much money we gather through the Rotary Foundation every year, around $400 million. We raised $400 million last year, $100 million from the Gates Foundation and another $300. But we really had no idea of the value of the volunteer hours that our Rotarians put in across the globe, or how much money is raised locally by Rotary clubs that doesn't go through the Rotary Foundation. And so we hired Johns Hopkins, which is a leader in this field, to help us quantify in an objective, credible way the value of the volunteer hours of Rotarians around the world. And I was privileged to announce at the Hamburg Convention that that figure is $850 million a year, is the value of the volunteer hours of our Rotarians around the world. And we said, all right, how do we figure out how much, in a credible way, Rotarians give other than to the Rotary Foundation? And so this year we hired some graduate students at Harvard to figure out how much cash exactly is raised by our clubs. And I was able to announce with great pride at the International Assembly that we estimate that our clubs raise an additional $1.15 billion a year. That is an incredibly impressive figure. And so how do we do that? Well, it's a heck of a lot of pancake days and walkathons and all the myriad of other activities that we do. Let me just give you two examples that I was really, really stunned by in my travels through the Rotary world. There is a small club north of Seattle. It has about 20 members. It's a breakfast club, and I had the privilege of visiting that club and for their meeting. And I asked them what's their big fundraiser? How do they raise money? And they say, oh, well, we run this massive haunted house on Halloween. And we have like 3 levels of terror, like really scared, tremendously scared, and terrorifically scared. And we charge different levels, pay more money to get more terrorized. And I said, well, so how much money do you raise through this haunted house? And they go around $250,000. I'm like, okay. I was in Kelowna, Canada, which is a beautiful, sort of the Napa Valley of Canada. If I were Canadian, that's where I would retire to. And there are 5 or 6 clubs in that town. It's not that, about 125,000 people, if I recall correctly. And I was having breakfast with the club presidents, and I said, just by chance, how much do you guys raise every year from your fundraising activities? And they said, oh, about 500,000. And I said, wow, now it's 500,000 Canadian, so it's not, we don't have any Canadians in the audience, I hope. But still, that is an incredibly impressive figure. So if you add the $400 million that goes to the TRF every year to the $850 million that value of our volunteer hours, plus the $1.15 billion in cash, and we're not even counting the in-kind contributions that Rotarians make. The value of our activities, again, not counting the in-kind contributions, is $2.4 billion. And that puts us right up there with the Gates Foundation as one of the great NGOs in the world. And I think that should make each and every one of us proud. And I also think what it does is it allows us to market ourselves effectively. We can now go out into the world and with credibility say we are a $2.4 billion organization. But we're also so much more than just doing projects. Building peace and goodwill among peoples is not just a slogan for Rotarians. These concepts are deeply rooted in our history and culture and are increasingly important at a time when civility and civil discourse are sorely lacking both here at home and abroad. For example, this year we celebrate 75 years of Rotary's extraordinary relationship with the United Nations. 45 Rotarians participated in the drafting of the UN Charter in San Francisco in 1945. A 1943 Rotary Conference in London led to the creation in 1946 of UNESCO. And of course, our long relationship with UNICEF in eradicating polio, which Dave talked about, and I'll talk a little bit more about later in my remarks. Our youth exchange programs, RILA, Rotaract, Interact, are making a huge difference in the lives of young people and do an incredible job of promoting goodwill and friendships that span the globe. And of course, the $2.4 billion that I just talked about, the value of our work. That, and much, much more, is why Rotary matters in today's world. But I think this also raises the question of what makes Rotary unique. Why are 1.2 million women and men in over 200 countries and geographic locations Rotarians? Why are each of you who are here tonight Rotarians, members of this great organization? Well, again, as I mentioned, this is my 9th year as your General Secretary, and it's been an extraordinary experience. I have the privilege of leading a professional staff of almost 800, 600 in Evanston, and then 200 outside the United States in our 7 international offices. We own our own building, 18-story building. We use half for our own purposes and half we lease out. It's one of the premier office buildings on the North Shore of Chicago. In fact, I invite each and every one of you to come to Evanston. There's an awful lot to see, both within the building. Bring a group of Rotarians from your club, your district, come. Maybe you've had visits from 5450. We provide great briefings for you, a really interesting program at One Rotary Center. Then you can go down to Chicago One. Marga is a member of Chicago One. She's also the president nominee. So you can do your makeup lunch there if that's what you'd like to do. And then you can visit the Paul Harris grave and the Paul Harris home. We're renovating Paul's home on the south side of Chicago to the way it was when he died. And then his grave is very, very nearby, so you can see it. Now, what's interesting is that the founder of Lions is buried about 50 yards from where Paul is buried, in the same cemetery. And I got to tell you, Paul's gravesite is a heck of a lot nicer than the one from the Lions founder. So even in death, Paul is beating Lions. So that's sort of one piece of my job. But the other is that I've had the opportunity, the extraordinary opportunity and privilege to travel the world and see Rotarians in action and the great work that we do. And I think what we do, we need to continue to build on what I would call 2 unique features of our organization. And I think these 2 features put us perhaps into a universe of one. And I think the first is that we represent what I like to say is the intersection between commerce and cause. You know, there's a lot of organizations out there that allow you to network professionally. In fact, I think we were kind of the original LinkedIn before anybody had actually heard of LinkedIn. In fact, it's really interesting. I was talking to the archivist of the Chicago Club the other day, and what he mentioned was they found in the archives something called lead cards. In the early days of Chicago One, in the early days of Rotary, every member had to bring a lead card to a meeting and provide a lead to at least one other member, a business lead, to at least one other member of the club. And if you didn't do it for like 3 meetings in a row, they would kick you out of the club. And so Rotary's really was, at the beginning, an organization set up not only to have fellowship, but to network professionally. So there are a lot of organizations that allow you to network professionally, and there are a lot that allow you to get involved in community projects. Yet I think we're unique because we bring together both of these opportunities. As I said, the intersection between commerce and cause. And I think the second unique feature of our organization is that we are both uniquely global and local at the same time. Being a Rotarian allows one to get involved in some terrific local projects and to make a true impact in your communities. But being a Rotarian also means you can participate in an incredible international network of like-minded professional men and women, and to participate in our many international fellowships and programs, and take part in tackling significant global issues such as the eradication of polio. So there is, in my mind at least, no question that Rotary, that unique organization of one, matters now in the world more than ever. Which then brings me back to the original question we posed, the future of Rotary. And in my mind, there is no question that the future of Rotary can and needs to be bright. First of all, because this is a great, great time to be a Rotarian. As we've talked about this evening, we are on the verge of eradicating polio. Again, we had some setbacks last year, 168 cases compared to 33 the year before. We had 139 in Pakistan and 29 in Afghanistan, and this year already we have 4 cases in Pakistan. In fact, when I was speaking with Aziz Menem the other day, who is our chief polio person in Pakistan, I said, Aziz, what the heck happened last year? And he said part of it was they had sort of done a major shakeup in the Pakistan government of their polio operations. They've now gotten that squared away, and it's in good shape. But he said the other big problem was, and he whipped out his cell phone, and he said it's real fake news. The problem is they were having staged scenarios where they would be vaccinating the children, and then 3 minutes later they're all writhing on the floor, foaming at the mouth. This was all videotaped and then shared over social media and caused huge huge problems. But we will overcome these issues. We've had some great meetings in Pakistan with the senior Pakistani government leadership. We have turned the corner, and I am confident we're going to get the job done. And in fact, that's what really drives me first and foremost as your General Secretary, that makes this job a passion. I remember my first National Immunization Day when I was in a slum in Mumbai, and as I was vaccinating the children, mothers were bringing their children into this little one barren room in a slum in Mumbai, and I'm vaccinating these children, and I look out the window, and I see 4 children crawling across the street. And at that point, polio eradication became, for me, a cause, an emotional, a deeply emotional thing beyond just an abstract concept. And I knew that putting those 2 drops in every child's mouth would prevent them from ever again having to face the danger of what those children were facing out on the street. In fact, for all of us, think about it. How many people can go to their grave knowing that they have participated in an endeavor that's going to leave a legacy for as long as mankind inhabits the earth? That, for me, is a very, very powerful thought, and that is why we need to get the job done. Second, we are now rolling out our new strategic plan and the action plan to actually make it a reality. Now, this strategic plan is going to guide us for the next 10 years. It has 4 pillars, and I won't focus on all of them, but there's one in particular that I'm very, very excited about. And that is, we're going to be trying to find new ways for people to engage in Rotary that goes beyond joining a Rotary club. And so we're going to pilot the whole idea of, for lack of a better word, global membership, where you don't become a member of a Rotary club, but you become a member of Rotary International. And so the question then, and the challenge we're going to face, is what's the value proposition? Why would I pay, whatever, let's make up a number, $200 to be a global member? What do I get for that in return? And that's what we're working on now, to see what it is that we can offer of value that will make people interested in joining Rotary beyond a Rotary club. And again, we have to shoot the score, we have to try, we'll see whether it works. So the second thing, for me, why it's a great time to be in Rotary: polio. Number 2, we're launching this exciting new strategic plan. We're going to try to shake things up, try to do things a little differently. Third, we've raised more money in the foundation than ever in our history. As I mentioned, we raised $400 million last year. That is an extraordinary, extraordinary achievement. And we've done a very, very good job on planned giving. If you look at our expectancies coming down the line in the next 20 years, it's going to be an extraordinary, extraordinary number. This organization financially is poised to do even more incredible work going forward. And finally, Rotarians, we're doing more global grants than ever. We launched the new global grant model back in July of 2013, and we currently now have more global grant applications than we have money in the World Fund for them. That's a really good problem to have. It shows Rotarians are stepping up. Rotarians really have grabbed the bull by the horns. It's a good problem to have, and we're working very hard to try to resolve it. So again, this is an incredible time to be a Rotarian. But we do face some challenges, serious challenges to our future. So let me offer a global perspective on where we stand as an organization, at least in the future, going forward. And I was at an institute in Niagara Falls earlier this year, or last year, and I did one of those kind of armchair Q&A things with Jeffrey Catarad, who's the director for that zone. And Jeffrey asked me, goes, John, just out of curiosity, what are the things that kind of keep you up at night as Rotary's general secretary? And I thought about it, and I said, there's 6 things. 6 things. It's probably maybe a conservative, no. There's 6 things that keep me up at night. The first is membership, and I'm going to be very, very frank with this group. We as an organization, and again, probably not news to anyone, but we as an organization have been flat at 1.2 million members for the last 20 years. Last year, 150,000 people joined Rotary, and 150,000 left Rotary. So we have, in some ways, almost a retention problem. We do have, in my view, a crisis of membership in North America, the UK, New Zealand, Australia. For the first time in Rotary history, North American Rotarians make up less than 30% of our worldwide membership. We started in 1905 by definition at 100%. We're now down to 29, and dropping. Within the next 10 years, if current membership trends continue, Asia will be 50% of Rotarians will come from Asia, and that's terrific. That's outstanding. North America is going to be down to 15 to maybe 10%. We need to grow Rotary everywhere, and we're simply not doing it in a number of key and very important Rotary countries. And so what do we do about it? Well, for me, one way that it seems to me we need to look at this is that we are selling a product. I mean, not like soap and stuff, but we're selling a product. And what is our product? It's the club experience. It's the experience you get by paying with your time and with your money. And our numbers are showing that in certain markets, particularly in North America, people are either not buying our product, or when they buy it, it's not what they thought it was going to be. So one of the solutions, and we've begun really pushing this idea hard over the last few years, is to grow Rotary through the development of new and different club models. In other words, let's diversify our product line. We've been a one-horse product, an organization that's had one product for the last 100-some years, and it's been wildly successful. But it's no longer that way. So right now, with the new flexibility we've been afforded by the Council on Legislation, in my view, we need to begin developing club models that don't fit the traditional model, but which are going to be appealing to the demographic that we're trying to attract. Let me just give you one example of a club that's doing extraordinarily well. These passport clubs you may have heard about. The original one was in San Jose. Only meets 6 times a year. Every other month, and every other month they have a social. And then a member is required to attend those 6 meetings and then either give $1,000 to the foundation or spend 40 hours doing service with one or more clubs or nonprofits in the district. Well, that club has grown from like 25 to well over 100 in several years. And these passport models are now starting to proliferate around the world. They don't comply with the rules, but they sure are being successful where they've been tried. So we need to be creative, we need to think out of the box, and we need to remember that there is no Rotary police. If it works, let's do it. What can't change, however, are our values. Those are immutable, those are written in stone, the 4-way test, our ethics, our values. Those can't change. But how we operate, those are just means to implement our values. And there we need to be flexible, we need to think out of the box. Second thing that keeps me up at night, and this kind of builds on the membership issue. Will we remain relevant as an organization? Now, I know, Greg, at the Institute you had, one of the institutes you invited Steve McQueen to come to speak to us. And Steve's an Australian. He's got a really nice presentation where he talks about what he calls the relevance curve. And he maps out how organizations sort of move up that relevance curve. They sort of top out at some point, and then they become sliding down the curve. And he says there's a point on that curve where there's a point of no return. You can't go back. And his concern was we're not there yet, but we're heading in that direction. And so the challenge for us is, will we be Kodak, which actually had digital cameras, but thought they were in the film business when they're actually in the memory business? Or are we going to be nimble enough? Are we going to be able to realize that we have a tremendous product to sell, but we just need to really think about it differently? And so will we remain relevant? That's the second thing that keeps me up at night. The third, will we be nimble enough to react? There's tremendous competition out there. You can go online, as I said, there's just thousands of options to network professionally. There's going to be thousands of options to give back to your communities, whether it's local or international. Technology is changing the way people operate. I just see my daughter, she's 27. She and I live on different planets in terms of how we communicate. Calling her, forget it. Texting her, yeah, she'll get back to me. You know, for them, the idea of calling and talking to each other sounds very bizarre and strange. So in this world that's changing rapidly, where the younger generations are operating in a completely different space and in a completely different way, will we be nimble enough to react to these changes? We are like an aircraft carrier. When we get it's tremendously hard to move. When we move, it's impossible to stop us, as we saw with polio. But this is a world where we need to be more like a PT boat than an aircraft carrier. So will we be nimble enough is the third thing I worry about. The fourth, continuity. For us to successfully implement the strategic plan, for us to successfully, in my view, overcome some of the challenges that we have, it's going to require 10 or more years of continuous action, of continuity. Yet as an organization, we are designed to be discontinuous, and for good reason. But half our RI board changes every year, a quarter of the trustees change every year, the RI president changes every year, the governors change every year, presidents change every year. So in this structure of institutionalized discontinuity, how do we act in a continuous manner? How do we act in a strategic way? Will our leadership chains at the club, district, regional, and international levels operate as a continuous team? Or will the traditional my-year approach prevail? So that's the fourth thing that I worry about, is continuity. Will we be able to implement in a institutionally discontinuous structure the concept of continuity to move our organization forward strategically? The fifth is our next global project. We will eradicate polio. And when we do, the question will arise, what are we going to do next? Should we do a global project? I personally feel we do need one. I think polio put us on the map, quite apart from all the tremendous good we're doing. It has put us on the map in terms of public relations. It's put us at the table in different fora that we never would have been to, had it not been present at, had it not been for polio. And so the challenge is, what are we going to do next? And of course, you have 1.2 million Rotarians, you can have 1.4 million points of view. And because we have, our Rotarians do so many good things across so many areas, and they're all great, and they're all good, and they all would warrant and merit our sort of global attention. And so it seems to me that if we're going to have a new global project, it needs to meet three key criteria. In fact, the Harvard Business Review asked me a few years ago to do an article and say, how was it that Rotary was able to stay the course for 30-some years in polio? And I said, I think it was important that polio had three key characteristics. One, it was meaningful to almost every Rotarian in the world. With 125 countries having polio, it was real for almost every Rotarian. It wasn't some distant disease that they were focused on that really wasn't meaningful in a personal way. Secondly, you could participate in polio eradication beyond check writing. Any Rotarian could be a vaccinator. And we had hundreds of thousands of Rotarians giving those 2 drops of polio vaccine to children around the world. And just like I became emotionally passionate and attached to the cause, so did hundreds of thousands of Rotarians. That helped us stay the course for 30 years. And finally, there's a clear and measurable end. You either have eradicated polio or not, and it's provable, and you can demonstrate it in terms of the data and reality. Achieving world peace, I don't know when you declare victory. Those kinds of things are much more difficult to quantify. So what is out there that will meet these 3 characteristics? And we're now beginning a quiet process. We don't want to take our ball off of polio, but we're now beginning a quiet process to see what, if any, we will do as the next project. Maybe we won't have one. Maybe we'll have a project in each of the 6 areas of focus, or maybe we won't have one at all. But that, for me, is the 5th thing. How are we going to handle this whole issue in such a diverse and passionate Rotary world to try to rally around the next global project? And finally, the growing regionalization in Rotary. And I think this is perhaps our biggest challenge as an organization going forward. Rotary is becoming different in different parts of the world. Not in a bad way, but it's becoming different. And so if I were to prognosticate where we're going to be in the next 2 decades, I would suspect we will eventually devolve into a confederation of regional entities. And so then this brings up a question, a fundamental question, or what I call the glue question, glue. What is the glue that holds Rotarians together? Is it structure? Is it the structure we have? And if that's the case, we need to be very careful about monkeying with the structure. Or is the glue that keeps us together our values and all of the activities that physically bring people together? Our convention, the district conferences, RAGs, youth exchange, our projects, peace programs, Rotaract, Interact, all the things that bring people together. And that's a very, very important question to get right, because the tendency is toward regionalization, differentiation in Rotary. That's where I think we're headed. And if we're headed in that direction, we need to be very careful that we do it in a way that maintains the glue that keeps us together as Rotarians. So, those are the 6 things that, at least in my view, are some of the more important challenges we will need to deal with as we consider the future of Rotary. But in the end, I am extremely optimistic. I think we're relatively way better off than our competition. But I'm also a realist. The challenges, especially those here in North America, are not going to go away. But I'm confident that with Rotarians such as those here in District 5450 and elsewhere, we will overcome these challenges. So my call to action to all Rotarians, especially here in North America, is the same thing that I said at the beginning of my speech. We need to listen to what the marketplace is telling us and be willing to step out of our comfort zone, to think out of the box, to shake things up, and to do things differently. Because if we don't, we risk becoming, in my view, the next Kodak. But if we get it right, and I think we will get it right, I predict that we can become an organization of 3 to 4 million Rotarians with an even greater, and I would say almost limitless potential for doing good in the world. And if we do this, the answer to why Rotary matters in the world will become even more self-evident. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me this evening. Thank you.